Now then, Pentonville Prison has been put into special measures after the watchdog uncovered appalling conditions at the North London jail. Well, let's bring in Charlie Taylor, who's Chief Inspector of His Majesty's Prisons. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. So you've issued an urgent notification to the Secretary of State for Justice after this inspection at Pentonville. First of all, what does that mean? And give us a bit more detail on what's prompted that.
Well, this is a power that we have that we very rarely use, but when we go to a prison that is in such a state that we feel that ministers need to take urgent action, then I write a letter to the Secretary of State and she will now have 28 days in which to respond with an action plan about what they're going to do about Pentonville. And this is a big, busy London reception prison, Victorian, crumbling, many of the issues we see in prisons across the country. But particularly worrying, we found at Pentonville, were new arrivals coming into the jail with no bedding, no pillows. I came across a guy who had only half a mattress in his room on his first night in prison. We found prison staff who couldn't account for where their prisoners were during the day. We found prisoners who were on constant watch, who were on suicide watch, being supervised by staff who were reading books, who were asleep in one case, and in one case, completely absent. And almost most concerning of all and redolent of the chaos at Pentonville was the fact that in the last 6 months, 130 prisoners out of 560 had been held on beyond the end of their sentence. So they were held illegally because the prison wasn't calculating their sentences properly. So this was a prison in a real state, and it's going to take some real effort to fix it.
So these prisoners that were being held longer than they should have been, that was all down to the prison not getting the date of their release right. It wasn't other delays in the system. Well,
it's possible there may have been delays with a handful of other cases, but by and large, this was a systematic failure that we saw at Pentonville.
So give us an idea of how the staff are coping. I mean, clearly this is a strain on the prisoners. How are the staff coping?
Well, there are some fantastic staff at Pentonville doing a really great job, but we also found a kind of sense of helplessness within the place. There was a sense that this is Pentonville and there's nothing we can do and it's all too difficult. And just a lack of real morale amongst many of the staff members that we talked to, despite many of them doing a really good job in difficult circumstances. So it was a pretty bleak place. It was very noisy, it was violent, drugs are getting into the jail, and really it needs some proper grip from the prison service if it's going to make progress.
Well, yeah, and do conditions like that have a real impact on prisoner behaviour?
Well, these are people who are going to come out from prison. And ultimately, if they've been in prison and they've had opportunities to take more drugs, if they've been living the chaotic life in prison that they lead on the outside, then the idea that prison is going to help them to not to reoffend is simply fanciful.
Give us an idea then of how common these urgent notifications are. Are there other prisons that are in a similar condition as far as you're aware?
Well, I'm glad to say this is the first time, the first one that we've awarded this year. Last year, sadly, we gave out 4 urgent notifications, but it's something we don't like doing, and we only do when we're really worried about the safety of prisoners and the safety of staff.
And the government has dealt with this issue. It talked about this issue very early on when it came into power of prison overcrowding, and it's talked about its ambitions to create 14,000 new prison spaces, and has also set out some sentencing reforms as well to help tackle the issue. Do you feel that enough is being done by the government?
Well, this is going to take time. We've got prisons that are in a state, they're very overcrowded, places like Pentonville, places like Wandsworth, places like Wormwood Scrubs, overcrowded, Victorian, crumbling prisons with not enough space for prisoners to be able to get involved in the activities that are going to help them prepare for release. We're seeing huge amounts of drugs getting into prison, and that is an enormous problem, particularly because they're being flown in by drones in many jails across the country. So there are some systemic issues within our prison service that really need to be fixed if we're going to have people leaving prison and not continuing the cycle of crime and imprisonment.
OK, well, Charlie Taylor, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, thanks so much for your time this morning, and I'm sure you'll bring us updates on the kind of response you get from the government. Thank you.
Thank you.